So welcome to this session around diverse revenue streams, and also welcome to the Better Hospitality Conference. If this is the first time you're locking in, it's a very big honor to be part of this. It's setting a new scene where we are, as an industry, maybe rewriting the playbook, as I mentioned before, for the people who was in the room. And also a big thank you to Domini and the Trident Supply team for organizing this event. It's a massive piece of work that's been done in no time. But today's subject, we have seen, incredible creativity and resilience within our industry, and launching new revenue streams over the last, I would say, we are now it's 13 months into it. We have done takeaway, meal kits, grocery sales, delis, online cooking classes, and much, much more. Creativity has been huge. Gift cards, I forgot to say as well. And even people are selling products they wouldn't even expect to sell pre-pandemic. And that means, we have suddenly become what they call in retail, this omni-channel business. And of course, there's some great learnings within that. And this is what we're going to be discussing today. What has gone well? What could have, what have we learned? What are we going to take forward? And how we actually there's something we actually maybe going to stop doing, even though we did it through the pandemic because it gave sense through the pandemic. And to discuss this very interesting subject, I would like to introduce you to two amazing industry leaders, Catrin Jones from Crust in Cardigan in Wales, and then we have Andrei Lussmann from Lussmann's, so in London. Catrin, I think you're probably much better than me just to give an elevator pitch about who you are and what your business is and what kind of impact you are doing out in your local community.
Great. So my name's Catrin Jones. My partner and I started Crust back in 2016 when we both moved back from Cardiff to our local area here in Cardigan. And we were baking from home, sourdough, donuts, all that kind of stuff, attending weekly markets, selling to some local shops, all that kind of stuff. And then 2 years later, we actually opened our cafe, which is an 80-seater cafe, so it's a big one in the middle of Cardigan town. And we kind of kept our bakery ethos, and it was predominantly brunch based. We have an off-site bakery which delivers the bread down to the cafe every day, and we also still deliver to the local shops. So that's kind of us in a nutshell.
Great. Thank you, Catrin. And Andrei, just a quick, people probably have heard about your business if they are into hospitality and stuff like that. You have some incredible, track record, but maybe just a short intro to you, to your background and the business you have today.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Lussmann's is about 20 years old. We're a small group of independent restaurants outside London, Michael. And we're in a few towns, and we have been growing slowly over the last 20 years. And we have a project coming up this year, which I'm hoping will open this year. And Lussmann's was all about essentially making sustainability a far more normalizing sustainability, taking away the Notting Hill tag and making it less about luxury and more about normality on our high streets. Because invariably sustainability is either usually owner-driven in one-off, fantastic passion-led businesses, or it's often high-end, expensive hotels, and there has to be a middle ground. So Lussmann's Fish and Grill is actually called Sustainable Fish and Grill, and it's exactly that. It's providing an alternative to the premium casual dining groups like Coat and the Ivy. I like to think of it as the thinking man's Ivy with ethics. So yes, 20 years old and still going, just.
Great. Thank you, Andrei. Catrin, let's kick off with the first question. What did you do when the pandemic hit? Because we're talking about different revenue streams there. What specifically practically did you launch in your business? Because I know you did a couple of things, looking a bit on what has been in the news and looking at your website. I can see you launched a web shop like many others did. But yes. What else did you do besides the web shop, and what has your learnings been?
Well, to begin with, we just did local bread deliveries, so door-to-door bread deliveries to the local area. But we had about 100 houses signed up straight away. So it was a lot of work, and it was just me and my partner. So we had 30 staff who all went on furlough. So it was just me and Oshan that did the bread deliveries for the local area. I think we learned quite quickly that it wasn't a very sustainable kind of business model to go down. It was more about kind of keeping our brand in the customers' minds while everything was closed, and to be able to provide that service for the local area. It wasn't very feasible. So what we then did was opened as a takeaway in the cafe. But again, that didn't work out too well, because obviously the strictest lockdown was stay at home, don't venture out if you don't have to, all that kind of stuff. So no one was really coming to us. So that's when we then decided, right, we need to kind of do something else. We already had a bit of a retail online space going, but what we then decided was to just launch a new one and a bigger one. And then we did that using our baking at home kits, our jarred up produce, so the kind of stuff that we'd use in the cafe, things like our salted caramel, our honey butter, jam, all that kind of stuff, jarred it up, got it up on the website, and as well as our baking kits. So we had 4 baking kits when we first started. It was 2 pancake ones. So it was a pancake kit to make at home. There was a boozy pancake kit. There was a dessert kit, and just a general bake at home kit. But what we did with the bake at home kit is we teamed up with Hyatt Denim, which is a local jean manufacturer. So we got together with them, and we decided that we'd donate a certain amount of the bake at home kit to them, because they were making scrubs for the NHS while the jean factory was closed. So that's one thing that really kind of took off for us, and that's kind of how we got our kind of baking kits out there, because we were kind of in the local press about it. We did a big thing about it on our social media pages, and so did Hyatt. So it kind of helped both ways, because we were able to kind of showcase what we had going, but also be able to help where we could and support some of the local businesses and the NHS during that difficult time.
Great. It's really interesting that you tried a couple of things, and then you found out what the need really was from your customers, and then you partnered up with another business to distribute and expand the message around it. And we talked about Hyatt Jeans before we went on. That's an incredible partnership. Well done, because they definitely have a foothold in the way they talk about credibility around the sustainability and so on. So that's such a great way of actually expanding your business in a way, together with other people. They were also in a difficult situation, and they needed that story to get out as well. So that great. What about you, Andrei? What happened at your place? You were normally dine-in restaurants, and that's predominantly how you've operated, isn't it, for years?
Yeah, quite right. Over 20 years, we've obviously been dine-in, and I've often said that I'd never do a deal with delivery or eat, and I thought that food to go was a waste of time, and we shouldn't forget the fact that it's lovely to go out and have dinner or lunch with people and have conversation. I suppose I'm just very old-fashioned, and I'm a great believer that you can't beat the real experience. And then obviously COVID happened, and I think 4 days before Boris told us we had to close the businesses down, it was the day that we all had those videos that came out on social media about nurses not being able to get food from Tesco's and various other places. The supermarkets had no food, because a huge proportion of food that we eat actually is from restaurants. The restaurants are no longer a treat once a month. I spoke about this last night. They are often, or at least in the southeast, a treat for 3 or 4 times a week. So that takes up a large volume of food that's required. So the supermarkets were found to be limited at best. So on seeing those videos, we contacted the NHS and basically said, I got 6 restaurants. We got hundreds of staff who are prepared to start cooking, working immediately. Otherwise, I'll end up working for Amazon tomorrow, and it'll be a disaster, because after 30 years in the industry, that would be not what I want to do. And we've all got talents and skills and passions, and we all want to work. In my naivety, I assumed that the NHS would turn around in 24 hours and say, yes, let's start tomorrow. Of course, that didn't happen. So on day 2, and this was 3 days before Boris said close down, we set up over 30 hours an online supermarket as such. and started, a bit like Catrin has spoken about, exactly that. So we opened up to our entire customer base, which was about 25,000 on our mailing list, and said, listen, we can bring Lussmanns to you. And in doing so, we obviously had Mothering Sunday, which was coming up, which was a massive day, the biggest day of the year in regards to fruit and veg suppliers and various other suppliers. And they all had full fridges and nowhere to go with their stocks. So it was really a matter of preserving cash flow, maintaining that we had something to do in these really dark moments, and also providing our suppliers with a sense of don't give up. We'll try and, in our own small way, start, relieving some of the pressures that you have. And I'm happy to say that, within 2 weeks, we were serving 4,000 or 5,000 ready-made meals. 4,000 or 5,000 ready-made orders a week, which consisted of many, many meals. And that was, over lockdown, a huge success, because no one was out and about. Everybody needed fruit and veg, everyone needed wine, they needed ready-made meals. And again, we tried to make sure that it was cheaper than Charlie Bingham's at the supermarket. It was made in compostable boxes that you could put on your compost heap. It was something you could just throw in the microwave or the oven with no fuss. So essentially it was a ready-made meal rather than a kit. And people loved it, and it was a real success. But then obviously over the year, we had to constantly pivot, and I'm sure we'll touch on those things in a moment. We had to continually consider keeping customers excited, and keeping customers coming back for more, because the biggest issue we had, and I'm sure this is the case for every business, was A, we didn't know what was happening. B, we didn't know what decisions were going to be made that would affect our businesses. And without any cash, with all the staff to pay, and all the fixed costs that we have as a burden, it was really worrying. And even though when furlough arrived, it was a godsend, we all had laboured, we all had around our necks massive debts and massive costs that needed sorting. So I suppose doing the food to go was less about being a champion for our locals and trying to support the NHS, dare I say it, and more about saying we've just got to survive and do what it takes. And, as I've often said, half the artisan is better than the dead artisan. So all those years of doing wonderful stuff will die unless we somehow find some resilient focus, and are quick enough to pivot with regards to the ideas and the way in which we communicate those ideas. And one little thing, because obviously I'm sure we can touch on the other areas later, I've always been very slow on technology and very poor with tech. And I suppose on day one, I made it really clear that with this e-commerce side, it had to be all e-driven, no calls, no emails. It was all about creating something which is slick, easy, simple, take the money today, put it into our bank today, and then deliver. But as Catrin will appreciate, to build something and then to produce and then to box and then to pack and then to pick and then to send, then to actually deliver yourself, I learned things that I never knew existed, because of course delivering to a table in a restaurant is very different to doing all of that in what became a warehouse and delivering to customers in their own homes.
Great, Andrei. Lots of learnings there. Just coming back to the learnings, Catrin, are you still operating in the same way and doing the same kind of activities around the added revenue stream with home delivery and stuff like that? What have you stopped doing, and what have you continued doing?
So we've stopped doing the home deliveries as in door to door. And what we did, we just increased our kind of bread numbers for the local shops so that customers could still get their bread, but from the kind of local corner shops and stuff instead, rather than us delivering door to door, because that just got a bit much in terms of timings. So we'd probably start at like 1 a.m. in the morning to make the bread, let it cool, package it, put it in the van, and then start delivering. And then we'd probably be delivering to someone's door like 5 p.m. the next day. So it was just starting to get a bit like long hours for us, but also just the kind of the freshness and the, people want their bread in the morning, So we just kind of got our kind of local shops, which we'd already been delivering to, increased the numbers with them, and then just directed our customers to there instead. We've continued with all of our online retail stuff. And we've actually kind of expanded on it a little bit, and we launched a whole new website, I kind of outsourced all of that because we were doing it in-house. And I guess this is a bit about what Andrei's kind of touching upon there. So we kind of went from surviving to kind of striving, because we were like, okay, if this is going to be what we're all about now, we always try and be like the best, and we want our standards to be like top notch. So we were like, okay, we can't just have a few baking kits on an old website to kind of keep us going. We need to kind of take this to the next level so that people will come back to us and kind of have that return custom, and we could maybe tap into something new here. So we got like a whole new website, new packaging, new branding for the kind of labels and all that, just so that it would kind of stand out, I guess, from the crowd, and we could offer something a bit different. So that we've continued with. So we've got this brand new website that's up and running now, and that is still kind of going strong. But we have noticed it's not been as busy as it was in the strictest of lockdowns, because we've also opened up the cafe now for kind of all takeaway stuff. So we're getting a lot of custom there as well, but the online shop is still up, is still running, and we will continue with that for the foreseeable.
And when in the online shop, you're sending it to people's door instead of
Yes.
delivering it, yeah, because that's an interesting thing. The complexity Andrei also talked about on the logistics. What about you, Andrei? Because I looked a bit on your website the other day, and I can see you have like Burger Wednesdays. People can come and pick up and stuff like that. What have you stopped and continued doing, and what have you found like, you know, a rhythm, a flywheel for what you guys are doing from besides, you know, takeaway?
Well, this is our closing week for our to-go, essentially our to-go business. And our to-go business really had three main revenue streams. One was the ready-made meals. And when I say ready-made meals, I'm including fruit and veg, cheeses, charcuterie. Again, trying to keep it well priced rather than it being too premium and Harrods. You know, something that actually, if you want something that is more than a treat, it's because you're shielding and you can't get a delivery. It became very clear that a lot of our regulars were saying, we like the fact that you got fruit and veg boxes. Can you actually do small ones? And can you do a variety of salad boxes? And all of a sudden, we were basically taking what the fruit and veg man was doing and morphing their business. And on that point, it was interesting that our fruit and veg man was doing up to 2,000 fruit and veg boxes a day out of his warehouse at the height of the problems with not enough food in the supermarkets. And he had cabbies in the Essex-Hertfordshire border coming out because they had no money, buying fruit and veg boxes, loading up their black cabs and delivering them as their new work for 3 months. I mean, you know, it was interesting how many varieties of works that were being undertaken in order to move this stock on. It was almost like a war effort. And so we gained very quickly a very clear idea of the customers liking what we were doing because the numbers were very, very high. We were very, very busy. And then that moved on to doing, when we were allowed, when it softened up a bit, we did market stalls outside. And in addition to market stalls, we then also did sort of organic, from Rig up in Bala, organic burgers on Saturdays, which was Strictly Burgers. So we tied it in with Strictly Come Dancing. And that went very, very well. And we were selling, you know, a lot across all the restaurants. And that was a good idea of trying to get different chefs in different restaurants coming in, albeit for one shift, making sure that the business was still standing. We didn't have leaks, because the biggest problem when you close a restaurant over a period of time is things go wrong from a maintenance perspective. And we had 3 floods in the first lockdown that we didn't expect. And then the gourmet burgers then moved to Wednesdays because we were cannibalizing our very own business on the weekends through the ready-made meals. And then finally, that all carried on and has carried on consistently and has been very busy. We then introduced on the backside of these meal kits and boxes that the likes of Rick Stein were doing and Hawksmoor were doing, and the Wolsey. I thought to myself, well, one, we haven't got a sustainable version of all that, and furthermore, we haven't got a local version. So I was on a Zoom meeting with the chaps from Hawksmoor and Rick Stein's son, and I sort of politely said, my job is to basically do what you're doing locally, but better. And I said it with a joke, but the point was I was trying to say to our locals and regulars, which we have many, you don't have to go to some, national carrier. As long as the local provider is consistent, is well priced, and it tastes good, then brilliant. So we started the boxes, and in fact we started just before Valentine's Day. And for the Valentine's Day, Mother's Day period, which was essentially a month, we did over 1,100 boxes. And you're talking about boxes, fish boxes, steak boxes, and all the rest of it. And they were massively supported. But one of the issues we faced was we had to source bags to put in some of our ingredients into, in terms of sauces, whatever it might be, and or the trout, etc., vacuum packed. And it took us a long time before we got going to find a sustainable pouch, which essentially was plastic but could put in the compost heap. And unfortunately, like most things, I don't think the customers wholly appreciated what we went through. And it's a price that probably was 5 times the price of a normal plastic bag. But it was great to be able to turn around and say, you know what, you eat, everything is compostable, everything is edible, and you don't have to worry about anything. And it's almost trying to get your customers to appreciate that actually you take all the worrying out of the process. And that brought us really to the opening of one of our restaurants in the gardens that we've got now in one of the restaurants, where we've only got 25 covers. So of course, the sales have gone from massive sales on to go, which incorporate everything, to very, very lightweight sales. And we must now, as a business, get back to what we do best, what we've always done best. Remind our staff this is what their role is, and this is what their responsibility is, and this is what our job is. And actually, this is what the customers want us to do. So it's great that we had that variety of options, and opportunities to keep our customers happy, some of our staff working, the cash coming in. But really now we must start to get back to the real business of hospitality, for at least in terms of our business.
That's super interesting, Andrei, because there's a lot of talk on conferences, Zoom, about this new omni-channel kind of approach for Leon has been very big into this. Do you think that we start with you, Catrin, that maybe there's a lot of businesses that's going to find out now, as trust comes back, the world opens up, people can come and visit their places again, find out that maybe lots of these things is not viable, as Andrei touched on, and you will slowly maybe have it as a bit of a side thing, ready to go for if there should come another wave of pandemic. God bless us not, but if it should come, you're ready to be more agile when it comes, and how it works and what not to do.
Oh, definitely. I think it's kind of made us learn how to be more flexible with these things, because before I used to just love kind of consistency. We knew what we were doing. Every member of the team knew their responsibility, they were trained in it. And then when the pandemic hit, it just really got a bit inconsistent. You didn't know what was happening, you didn't know when you were allowed to reopen, you didn't know what would work. So you had to kind of take members of the team and train them in other areas. And they were actually really good at adapting and changing their roles and things like that. So going forward, I feel more confident now to be able to just chop and change at a drop of a hat. Because I don't know if you remember, but at Christmas time, the Welsh government announced on a Saturday night that we were to close. But so they said at 6 p.m. So, lockdown at midnight. So obviously, like the next day, we couldn't even open for brunch. And obviously we'd had all the ingredients in and everything like that. But I felt a bit more confident then at being able to have that kind of flexibility and know what to do. Right, this has happened before. We know how we're kind of doing this moving forward. But in terms of the kind of the different revenue streams, I think definitely there's going to be a change, kind of going back to what we were doing, kind of sit-in brunch. I feel like that's what the consumer wants. That's what they've missed. And I think it will kind of trail off maybe our retail kind of online shop, but we still want to kind of keep it going in the background and keep it there. And we also want to work on it, because a lot of our stuff, like our jars, granola boxes and things like that. We also sell them to wholesale now. So we've got lots of kind of independent retailers who buy off us now for their delis, some for their restaurants, like catering tubs of salted caramel, all that kind of stuff. And we've also started to get into kind of big wholesalers who are distributing it kind of Wales wide. So I feel like that's always going to be kind of ticking over in the background. And I do think that will grow, but we will definitely be going back into our kind of brunch ethos, cafe, coffee, and all that kind of stuff as well.
Great. And that led me to Andrei. You've been in the business for many years. Do you think this is easier for some businesses to do than others? And here I'm also thinking about that you have a strong brand already, and you're known for doing the right thing. Have you think that has been an advantage in the pandemic when people has been out looking for food? Because I think people had become more aware, or definitely a certain group of the consumers become more aware about where's my food from, what kind of impact does it have on me and also the planet.
Well, there's a lot of things to touch on there. I think that when we first started doing the to go, I was doing some of the delivery myself, and I was doing 70 deliveries a day, and I'd never delivered in my life. And I started talking to customers, not knowing that they knew who I was, and there's no need for me to tell them. And actually, I think that the very point that you make was they trusted the brand, and they recognized what we were doing, and they didn't think twice as to, we'll buy into that and we'll support them. There was no second thought. And that huge amount of business, which led to a lot of people being at home, obviously had a wonderful knock-on effect, because it opened up many new customers to what we were doing and what we were delivering. And therefore we did introduce some more customers into the business, which I hope now when we come back, they will come back and enjoy what we do. It's clear that when you go back to doing what Catrin has advised, in terms of running a restaurant or cafe, whatever the hospitality business is, the easiest way to make money is usually the business in which you have performed well in the past. You open up, people slot into their well-oiled grooves, they understand what they're accountable for, the customers recognize what you're doing, and you suddenly realize at the end of the day, you've made a lot of money, in contrast to having to, I think the food to go was very much working, if you can work harder than we normally do in hospitality, it was very much, we had to work harder and for longer, and not aware of which day would bring us what challenges. And at the end of it, you'd be making 5% of what you were making before. So that was the big difference in regards to, even though customers, and I think we've almost reached, or we're there or thereabouts 100,000, ready-made meals, in one sort or another, boxes, gourmet, whatever it is. We've done a lot, but we've opened Harpenden for 1 week. We've looked after 700 covers or customers in 25 covers, 25 seats outside, albeit heated with green energy, I'm happy to say. And I'm happy to say those customers are the easiest 700 customers and the easiest 700 customers worth of revenue we've had in the last 13 months. And you suddenly realize, God, actually, this is not so hard. I mean, of course, hospitality is hard by the nature, but actually, when you compare it to what we've been going through, in regards to the future, I always say that we should, in my opinion, focus on what we do best. It's really easy for us to go off on red herrings and sometimes foster our egos and love the idea of being all things to all men or women, but I do think that we have to be mindful that customers will always sink back after the honeymoon. This wonderful hedonistic summer has come and gone. We'll be faced with an autumn whereby people will contract again, I think, and they will look for great service, where they will look for consistent package, in terms of the offering. They'll look for the right cost, and they'll look for, and charming staff and all the rest of it. And if all of a sudden you are lending your efforts to all these other distractions, I fear, then you won't do what you've done before. And therefore these customers will say, when they come out of this hedonistic summer of '66 and England winning the World Cup and all this madness that is about to come, where the sunshine really is hot, I think what will happen is you'll lose those businesses or those customers that you worked so hard to try and keep hold of during the last 13 months. So I do feel that one has to sort of be a bit more boring on the whole, and on the, in most regards, get back to what you do best and do your best in making it better than it was 13 months ago. Because though there are less seats and less restaurants and less covers, I do feel that doesn't mean that we're all going to have more customers forever. I think that would be a fool's paradise.
That's super interesting reflection, because I think there's Danny Meyer in New York said the same kind of thing, that they've done a lot of pivoting as well. But he says the focus is now to come back to what we're really great at, creating great hospitality experiences from the inside out. And
your customers want that. We've had customers for 20 years, and sometimes I don't realize how solid, supportive, aware they are of what we're doing. Sometimes they are more aware of what's going on in a certain restaurant than I am, embarrassing that it sounds. And they don't want me to change the chairs. They want variety of menu and all the rest of it, and they trust the ethics. But our customers, and I feel that majority of customers come to us, probably for most restaurants, not because that we are championing sustainability, and we have done for many, many years and gone through one hell of a journey. It's because they know that they can enjoy something that will warm their cockles. They will have a good conversation. There'll be people with people they love. And that's what hospitality has always been, the home away from home. And, I've already felt it, having the food to go this week and the ready and all of that, and having the restaurant open. The staff coming back, which are, intellectually off kilter, mentally flabby, physically not on form. These staff need time to come back. And if they are within the midst of all this activity going on in different fields, then they're not going to be doing what they should be doing. So I don't say it's wrong. I just think that focus really on the simple aspects of one's business. And if you have time, for example, I'm employing one of my team to become an events manager, and part of that, as a result of this whole pandemic, is to keep the boxes, the dinners at home, and all the various other channels of events which come in, basically Lussmann's outside the restaurant. That will carry on, but that will be someone's responsibility, and they'll be accountable for it, and they will then focus on those requirements rather than saying to the restaurant manager, listen, tomorrow we've got 72 boxes you need to sort out, let's go chop, which is how hospitality used to be. Because you're going to fail, and being half Swiss, every box, all 1,000 of those boxes had to come out looking identical, and because people open these boxes or have their ready-made meals, and you haven't got someone to put their arm around you and look after you. So it's got to be 100% bob on. Otherwise, they'll go, oh, it was all right, and then you're forgotten. So to go and all the stuff that we've done over the last 13 months, I think primarily has kept us in business and kept our staff energized and giving us, and I love this phrase you've used, striving, not surviving. I think that's brilliant. We were surviving and then we started striving. And I think that's a lovely sentence. And I remember that now. I think that's exactly what we did. But we are a restaurant and we look after people who are seated in the restaurant. And that is a difficult job to do well at the best of times.
Yeah, especially when people can't come to your restaurant. But that's really interesting, Andrei. Catrin, you talked a bit about, you used your local brand in a way. Is that a way when you have this established brand and start thinking in the background, slowly growing that you can actually create different revenue streams about to that, with partnering like people with David Hyatt and so on, finding different ways actually to build extra revenue for bad times ahead when they come. So you're actually building that, revenue slowly instead of you have to push and make it work from day one. Is that a strategy you've been thinking about? Because I guess, the best brands in the world understand that people come, as Andrei had said, to visit the brand or the experience, and then you can serve them in different ways, slowly.
Oh, definitely. I think we recognized quite early on that it's going to be about our brand. And that's how we're going to get our kind of baking kits and produce out there, because as much as we are kind of quite local to West Wales and stuff, we have become kind of a bit more known nationally in Wales. So we thought, right, we've built this brand, we've definitely got that kind of established. So that's what we're going to have to kind of use, you know, to be able to kind of get these different revenue streams coming in. And then obviously the idea came about kind of partnering with other local businesses like the Butchers, Hyatt Denim, all that kind of stuff. But like kind of Andrei was saying, like we believe that consistency is so important. So we want people to choose to come to us, not to like Costa Coffee, you know. So we think if we can kind of get that consistency and the right price point and the correct standards, then people will come to us. And that's going to be hopefully what happens. We hope we'll still have that kind of loyalty coming back when things kind of start reopening again. Although in Wales, we don't have a date yet as to when we're allowed to reopen. We're still kind of in the dark about that. Obviously, we know when we can have like outdoor seating and stuff, but because we're in the middle of a town, kind of not on the high street, we're off the high street. So we don't have kind of much of an area to put many seats out. So we're literally just waiting to have that opening date. So until then, we're still going to be pushing our other revenue streams. So we're still going to be pushing the online shop, pushing our kind of takeaway, which we kind of call grab and go. So we've kind of got a bit of a deli setup, and we've got all of our breads, all of our pastries, we've got some savouries and things like that, and people can kind of come in and do their little shop.
And you talked about consistency, and that's quite interesting always, because we talk a lot about that in the restaurant world. Have you needed to, as you are coming back now into the new world, rethink your systems, your processes, the way you train people? Have to maybe take some of the playbook and rip the pages out and say we need to rewrite that to make sure we create that experience? Besides, of course, it has to be safe, but
yeah, I guess we're kind of keeping everything the same because we were quite strict on kind of consistency and customer service and stuff anyway. But the things that have changed is obviously the amount of customers we can actually seat. We've got all the big screens up now, and people might not notice, but that actually kind of affects customer service in the sense of it's much more difficult to hear when people are ordering, because we do a counter service, we don't do a table service. So we are kind of changing a few things just to make like the customer's experience a little bit better in that sense. But kind of consistency and standards and customer service has always been a big thing, a massive part of our ethos. And it's why we kind of started Crust, because Oshan was a chef and a baker anyway. And then our kind of hobby on weekends would be to go out to kind of cafes, restaurants, and just to kind of enjoy ourselves. And like Andrei was saying, it's not like a once a month treat anymore. People kind of do it regularly, go out and dine regularly. And we wanted to bring that ethos back to like a rural area here, because it's much different here compared to like a city or a big town. So we wanted to kind of create that kind of vibe where people could just come in and out, you know, as many times a week as they kind of wanted to or could afford. And we kind of want to make sure that that is still there. We don't want anything to be too like rigid, like, oh, this, you know, even just when we reopened for sit-in kind of before Christmas, like just the table setups had to change, because obviously you had to have that social distancing, because we kind of had them sat in a certain way, so you would have that flow and feel that kind of social vibe you want to go for and the atmosphere we were trying to create. And then we kind of had to have them a bit more like structured in a way. So things like that, I don't think it'll affect us too much, but it's just maybe not quite the same as what it was. But if we can just get obviously the standards of the food and the customer service and the consistency, so that people come back, don't they? They come back, oh, I loved that donut, I want that again. And if that donut is the same the next time, I want that again. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So it's just kind of keeping that consistency and trying to merge it into the kind of structure and with the rules and regulations that are in place now.
Great. Andrei, you talked a bit about bringing the staff back, or all of them. You probably had some of them back. Had this affected the way you've been, you know, the extra revenue stream, so on, how you're thinking about the people you hire, the way you do your people management? Is there anything that's changing in that as you go forward?
Well, excuse me. One thing that's been very clear is that staff who work together in a restaurant, it is an extension of the family, and I've experienced that my whole life, and it's quite tribal, and the staff and the team are very proud of their working relationship. And one thing that furlough did, and we're going to have to now put it back together again, it has created inadvertently a stake that has split the teams up. So those who have worked and those who haven't worked. And quite simply, there's a real sense of the bonhomie that exists has somewhat disappeared, because those who've worked invariably have worked very hard throughout the whole period, and feel as though no one will ever really appreciate how much they've worked. And those who haven't worked will be taking the view that, well, we couldn't work. And now it's about saying, right, how do we get these staff who have worked away to refresh, to have time off, an opportunity to just to recalibrate. And likewise, how do we get the new staff back in who are mentally and physically, as I said earlier, off kilter. And I can see that because, it is like riding a bike. It won't take long for them to get going again, like most things, but they have lost their focus. They have lost their drive in certain places. And in doing so, we have found that we've lost some staff during any period of forced, time away from business. Staff are given an opportunity to review their position, their what they're doing in life, and some have moved on to other things. We don't have a large staff turnover. We have lots of staff who work for the company for many, many, many years, and that brings it hosts its own issues when you have staff who work for you for too long. But the bottom line is that the next few weeks and few months is about finding a way to bridge that gap, bring them together, and fuse those two communities. And one of the things we're doing now is we've introduced a new online portal for a lot of compliance training and extra training that in terms of the point of what's happened, well, a lot of us haven't really had chance over the last 12 months to consider our own businesses. And one of the feelings of not frustration, but you see your colleagues in the industry having lots of time off and spending lots of time working out on new ideas and creating brilliant alternative approaches to their business. And we've turned around and thought, God, time, that would have been a fine thing. We haven't had a minute to think about anything, so, there's that which is going on. But we have had time only now to start thinking, actually, as you said, we have to provide the business, the staff, the stakeholders with a chance to say, from the last 13 months, yes, we earned that money and that kept us going. That's great. Put that to one side. Brilliant. All right. Well done. What can we lean on in terms of evolution, change, moving forward? Because you're right. When you are running a business and you are opening new restaurants and you're constantly going forward, it's all about repetition. And repetition doesn't really pull together challenges. It doesn't engage enough with the communities that need to engage enough. So we have now started to put together some modifications and some evolutions in the business that actually, had we not had lockdown, we wouldn't have had that chance. And I think that's a really important point, which is however tired we might be, some of us, and some people haven't had a holiday since the middle of the year before last. So you're talking about before Christmas 19, before Christmas 20. So you're talking about 19, sorry, because we opened a new restaurant in February 20, you see. So, we were all busy for Christmas, all busy up until March with Oxford. And then obviously some people carried on. But it's about just trying to find little things to just, replenish, give people a sense of we're on, a new route. It might be the same ocean, but, actually we're taking a slightly different type of wind in our sails now. And in doing so, you know how it is. You're told by your parents for 30 years or 20 years to do something. You don't hear it. You hear it from one person who's a mate down the pub, but exactly the same thing said slightly differently. And all of a sudden you're like, wow, that makes lots of sense. And I think it's a bit like with our staff. They hear us going on and on and on, and they're like, yeah, here we go again. But now it's our chance to slightly reframe it and give them the chance to come back at their own pace. And in doing so, trying to remind ourselves that actually we need one person in the business. And it's usually a good restaurant manager who has 1 foot in the kitchen and 1 foot in front of house, who, and our kitchens are usually front of house. And that person really has to be multi-skilled and being able to just to pull them all in, as opposed to making sure that you're getting, lots of money through the till. So we've purposely slowed down the revenue just to take time to get everyone on board, get them buying into it, get them enjoying themselves. Because if they're not enjoying themselves after all this time away, then we've got problems, and we've got a long summer ahead of us. So I think it's more of a marathon rather than a quick sprint today.
That's really great thinking you're sharing there, Andrei, because sometimes you need to slow down to move fast again. And we often forget that in the business we're in. We're always pushing the next thing we need to do. And you're right, there's probably a lot of people within the industry, I know a lot as well, that hasn't had a break, a moment in time where they've just been, on the next challenge they had in front of them they needed to deal with. Catrin, what about you, and how do you look at the staff thing as you're bringing them back? You're slowing down the takeaway or the online sales, but how are you taking them back? Because that's quite a good, interesting conversation, because now we just talked about opening, but the reality is we need some people to run our businesses, and some places in the world you're already seeing challenges around getting people back or having enough hands to actually operate your businesses.
Yeah, I think we're kind of facing the same challenges as Andrei was mentioning, and just the whole people being off for so long and then coming back and still having that passion and feeling a part of that team, and having that divide between the people that were in working during this time and then the people that have been off and then coming back in. And it's just about kind of getting them back on board again, making them feel a part of the wider team. Because I can imagine for them, it must have been a bit strange sat at home and seeing on all of our social media channels, like, oh, we're, 100 pancake boxes sold today, thank you. And then pictures of the guys like boxing them up. And then, some of the people that weren't in, I can imagine that would have been quite a difficult time for them. And it's just about kind of injecting that passion and just reminding them of the standards. And I think there's going to be a little bit of maybe some difficulty kind of going from the kind of takeaway service, which is just kind of grab and go stuff like I was mentioning, to back in service again, and having that, because ours is an 80-seater cafe and we used to do maybe like 200 covers a day. Between 10 and 2. So it was a really fast-paced environment. And at the moment, everything's a little bit slower. They've got a little bit more time to kind of recoup and do what they need to do. But when we kind of hit back into that brunch service, I think that's going to maybe be a bit of a shock to the system. But I think we'll get there in the end. And people they learn quickly and they get back into the swing of things quite quickly. So it'll be fine because we did it last year. But I think that they're the kind of challenges that I think are kind of coming our way now over the next kind of month or two, whenever we get the date of reopening.
Great. Andrei, we're coming up to question time. We can just do the last question here from me. What is your one top advice you would give to other operators right now?
Oh, okay. I can't give one. 3 words. Make sure you've got enough cash. I hate to say it, but make sure we are not losing our sense of humor and we're enjoying what we do. And that's a tough one. And that's it. Humor and cash flow.
That's good. That's a good one. Yeah, because you need that. That's for sure. What about you, Catrin? Do you have any top advice to people out there before we go into the questions?
My advice would be to get as much advice as you can from people already within the industry. So that's kind of what we did with like the retail and online shop side of things. We watched loads of webinars, we asked loads of questions, we got in touch with loads of people and just tried our best to kind of find our way in that world because it was so new to us. So that would be my advice. Just go out and get as much advice as you can from others that have experienced it already.
Good. Thank you.
I've got another one. I've just thought of another one. And don't underestimate how much things cost, because when we went from the surviving to the striving, when you kind of get into that striving territory, the costs of stuff just start, branding, packaging, like what did we have, like the leaflets to say, the method cards, everything like that just suddenly just piles up and up and up. Brochures, everything, postal packaging, petrol money to take stuff to the post office, everything just piles up from that kind of surviving, like, let's just plod along, to actually, I think that we've got something here, let's just go for it. But just be aware that it just suddenly costs a lot more than what you thought it would.
Yeah, great advice. Know your numbers and then
Yes.
and do them before you expand the idea too far. Great, thank you, Catrin. Let's just check if there's any questions coming in into the chat box. I have one I made as we went along. I'm just going to check here. No, I don't think there's anyone, but like I have one because one thing I think that a restaurant has a great, or hospitality business has a great opportunity, especially around food and especially what you guys do, is the education bit. Is there any viable way to actually, make a business out of the, knowledge you have about food and sharing that? You then made baking kits, you said, Catrin, and actually learn people probably to skill them at home to bake. Is there any viable model in actually doing education and actually charge for it? There's different restaurants that's tried this during the pandemic. What is your view, Catrin?
Well, I saw a lot of people kind of doing baking classes and online kind of stuff. And I think that maybe that there's a little something there. We didn't do that just because of time and things like that. But I'm thinking that, there could be a potential for something like online stuff, because that's obviously something that's come up, as we all know, like Zoom and online things like this, conferences, meetings, classes. Maybe that is something that could be done in the future, kind of educational for people who want to maybe learn or train in baking. I'm not sure, but maybe something's there.
Yeah. What is your view, Andrei?
We funny enough, we were discussing this a couple of weeks back in regards to the way we do sustainability and make it it underpins what we do, as opposed to it being the flag waving banner that pulls people in. And there's, through the SRA and being a founding member, there's lots of things that we've learned to do from best practice and from the evolution of a business, that you can't do it all on day one. So in terms of training, we've thought that we're going to probably take the sustainability training to a point whereby we're going to try and get some sort of format designed and put together for either schools or older people who are interested in what happens in the workplace. So there are a lot of customers out there which are very interested in what we do. We never have any time to discuss it and advise them. We just sort of say, well, and we only touch upon it on our website, because you don't want to come across as a religious sort of leader, sort of banging down the Bible and saying this is the way, because that's not the way to enjoy hospitality. So we've earmarked an individual in the business who's very interested in taking this forward, and we're putting that together with an idea of bringing customers together who can have some lunch in a restaurant and learn some bits and pieces and all the rest of it for very little money. It's just through the keyhole in terms of making sustainability work on the high street. And from that, people will suddenly be able to air, questions, because there's a lot of hogwash and there's a lot of ambiguity and a lot of misconception out there. We don't look at how supermarkets brand products being British farms and realise they're nothing close. And we have to live alongside supermarkets. They're a very important part of our food chain. So, it's interesting that there's a lot of just misunderstood, and the fact that we do it, I would say we can always improve, but we do it rather well. And we've been on a it's been every single year of Lussmann over 20 years. We've been a 3-star member of the SRA since pretty much day one, but we have got better every year. Whereas usually you get bigger and more successful, what happens is you start to dilute and cut away and reduce. And I've always said, for as long as my name is above the door, we're not going to do that. And I remember 20 years ago trying to recycle my food waste and do all my recycling, and there wasn't anyone out there which would do it unless they charged me something like 30 times more than Biffa. We have thankfully come full circle, whereby now landfill taxes are so high that we're now realizing that actually there's a business in actually people stealing your vegetable oil that you've used, where years ago you'd have restaurants chucking it down into the sewage. That happened. I mean, we didn't do it, but I know people used to do that sort of thing. They couldn't get rid of it. So I think we will take the training and more of a more holistic and an enjoyable passage, I suppose, through what sustainability looks like. And maybe in the school, but I don't want people to think we're doing it because we want to make money out of the kids' parents. You know, that would be far from what I'd want to do it for. So maybe more just for grown-ups and adults to enjoy over a glass of wine. So that we are working on that now. So I'd hope, you know, within 6 months we'll have that sort of syllabus ready.
That's super interesting. So it's about actually giving more than you take in principle than a revenue stream. It's actually all the knowledge you have acquired over the years, how you actually maybe can put that out to people so they can make better choices for themselves.
And you just don't want to come across as somebody who's being overly smug about what you're doing. And that's why we've always been very quiet about it, because I still believe that there are those who like and believe in sustainability. After all, this is what this conference is all about. Will search you out, find out what you do, and appreciate what you have to do. And I'd say the vast majority of our customers are normal people like you and I, who come along because they just want to be looked after, and they love the great food that Catrin's doing and the consistency of it and the setting. And the sustainability issue is probably quite low down on their levers or drivers of making decisions. And it's about not making that the number one driver. It's about making business, I think, just do it standard, and all of a sudden it becomes an easy decision for customers because they don't have to worry about it.
Good. Thank you, Andrew. Sarah, have you any questions you want to ask the panel? You can unmute if you want to.
Yeah, I don't actually have any questions, but I just wanted to say that this has been really insightful today, because the entire lockdown, I work in hospitality myself, and I'm actually waiting to move to Saudi Arabia to open a restaurant, which I've been working on a project for a year. And finally, I'm getting my medicals and visas in the next 2 weeks. But it's just been really admirable listening to what you've all had to say. For me, I'm a true believer in the consistency and being absolutely brilliant at the basics. And then business will grow from there. It's something that's sort of drilled into me. I've spent the last year trying to keep people engaged on Zoom, of a team of 117 people that I've employed. So that's kind of the challenges that I've faced. But listening to the two of you and what you've gone through, I can truly see how much hard work has gone into it. And I just kind of throw out the thank you there to you guys, because you're the true ones in the hospitality that make it work. And yes, I've worked for a couple of quite corporate, businesses that are sort of dealt with it in different ways. And I just look at the true passion that's come from two of you. And my love goes out to you guys, because I can't wait to see the success of your businesses coming out of this. I really can't. So I had no questions, because you absolutely covered everything, and I'm in true admiration of it. And if I was in a business in the UK in the last year, it would have been great to be working for one of the two of you. It truly would, because I can see the passion and drive there. So yeah,
thank you so much, Sarah.
Very lovely, Sarah.
It's been a great way to start the morning, and I'm only sorry that more people didn't come on. I know people can watch these videos post the time, but you know, this was one that I really wanted to hear about some stories, and you've 100% delivered on that for me. So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. That's very kind of you.
Cheers, Sarah.
Actually, Michael, I had a quick question for both of you guys, because obviously the move into the online space, the compliance around that versus having a physical store are very, very different. And I've because it's an area that I'm involved in, I've seen quite a few people making that move into the online space and actually not keeping up with the compliance that they need to. Like, is there any kind of tips and tricks that you'd give to people to make sure that they are still staying within the laws and the laws of distance selling, which they might not be fully aware
of? Well, I think you must pass the baton on to an expert. I don't like using consultants. You know, we don't use designers for the restaurants because they're too expensive, so I do it myself. But with regards to compliance and the law, and the possibility I'll get it wrong. No, not possibility, I will get it wrong. So we on day one moved to a media agency and said, right, we've got 30 hours to make this happen. And that's what they do for a living. So yes, they were expensive to begin with, but they worked with us and they weren't too expensive. So I think anything to do with compliance and IT and tech it's a bit like, why do it yourself at home in terms of trying to fix the plumbing if you're not very good? Just get someone who's a plumber. I mean, who knows their craft, knows their trade, recognizes the problem like that, and it won't return. So I think this is the same thing, is that we all try hard to do everything ourselves, but I'm not a tech person, and who better than a tech company to take care of all those issues? Plus, if there's something does go wrong, they'll very quickly, a few things did go wrong for us, they'll very quickly know what the answer is, as opposed to you fumbling around in the dark.
Yeah, exactly the same with us. We just outsourced all of that stuff straight away. As soon as we decided that we wanted to go kind of make it a bit of a bigger thing, we just, outsourced the kind of website to actual experts who knew what they were doing, because we were doing a few things in-house to begin with, but that was when we weren't selling too much online. But as soon as obviously all of our sales were coming from online, we just got the experts involved.
Was that the case with food labeling as well? Because obviously food labeling is different for online versus in-house.
Yeah, that was the same. We're quite lucky. We've got like a food centre that have kind of experts there that'll help you with that kind of stuff. So we approached them about our label packaging, our baking kits, and what exactly did we have to have on there, which allergens, all that kind of stuff. So they helped us out with that, so that we knew that we were doing it the correct way.
I mean, I think in the first couple of weeks we got going, we probably weren't 100% compliant. We were with allergens. There was no issue with that. And I think, to be honest with you, the world was in such turmoil. Governments, councils, no one knew what was going on. So we took advantage of that 100% as to, let's just get it out there. And in regards to that, very quickly, as Catrin explained, every week is an evolution. It gets better and better and better and better and better. And suddenly you realize that you've got a lot of business coming in because you're doing it all right. And the beauty of everyone starting to come back into the business, lockdown 2 and 3, and everyone was doing boxes and food to go, is that we were all a little bit quieter. And in one way, we were like, I don't like it so much anymore. But the fact was, actually, it wasn't a bad thing, because it meant that all our colleagues and contemporaries could then get on and participate in the same thing that we were doing. We were just, quicker off the mark. So we didn't, we did our own labels, but as Catrin said, the prices and the printing, these are all the hidden costs that when you run a business, about, but when you do a satellite business, is what we all did. And these are satellite businesses using the same 4 walls and same ovens, but it's not the same business in any other way. You suddenly realize you are so vulnerable, and you're getting printing bills of £400, £500, £600, £700 a week. And you're like, oh my God, no one told me about that. And then you have the logistics, £1,500 a week, £2,000 a week, and you start putting these in. So we very quickly put together a P&L, very simple P&L to go after a week, and said, right, we need to be on the button, because otherwise we'll do all this effort and we'll be exhausted, knackered, upset, frustrated, and we'll lose more money, and potentially we'll damage our brand. And I think, Michael, you mentioned earlier about the importance of keeping your brand going. I think it was very important that you recognize that you might have a good brand name and people recognize who you are, but by the same token, if you're not careful, you can erode that brand very, very quickly by giving people a poor meal that's not better than the rest. And all of a sudden, they won't rush back to eat with you when you're open. And that will be a disaster. The very thing you're trying to protect is the very thing you're damaging. So I think that was a very important passage that we realized on week 2. We've got to be, taste testing, someone going around 11 o'clock, clipboard, checking everything, making sure it all hits the right guidelines. Otherwise, you lose the business.
Great. Thank you, Andrei, and thank you both, Catrin and Andrei, for really great insights, strategies, and learning you shared there. I've nailed it down, so maybe I'm wrong. In principle, what you have learned is like you probably need to go back to do one thing well, really well. That's what the future looks like. It doesn't mean you don't continue doing other revenue streams, but do one thing well, know your numbers, know where your cash is, and also bring your people back safely and be aware they are not coming back as they left the ship. And also, brand of the future are the one that actually, cares for more than just serving a plate of food. They care about all the things around the ecosystem around it. So this has been a brilliant conversation, guys. Thank you so much for your time.